move to the top of the stairs here.
You bet. What would you like?
People, can we move now? We're going to take up position along the top line of
just sort of gave it to me, and I said thanks. I didn't ask him if he got my card or anything. He just sort of like had it in his hand, so he must have gotten it. And my two things were the drum, the war drums with Uncle Sam, and Bush saber rattling. And well, I didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to make the sabers. Well, it's not that I didn't get a chance. It's someone I do, and I don't know whether I want to do it or not. I could also do the drum with this.
I bet they'll come in over there. You want to stay with me
Tell by all the ones that read my lips, George. No. The only butt I want to kick is George. Start yours. I'll help you, but what's the...
I'm surprised if Red Public will
Sign salute.
Different things. I think we want maybe a little later, but we want everybody to
War! Money for peace, not for war! Money for peace,
I tried to talk a couple times, but no answer. I have some money for you. I have
money for jobs, not for war! Money for jobs, not for
I'll be over before. I'll try to be over sometime between now and like Monday.
not for war! Money for homes, not for war!
Some of what you gave me has mold. And at one point I was really sure.
I don't know how I really feel about it.
No blood for war like Persian Gulf War. As you all know, 1 month ago, a tremendous and historic event took place. And that is that after 45 years, the Cold War ended. A tremendous development. And all over the world, people began to say, maybe now we could throw away the bombs and the nuclear weapons and the tanks and start feeding the hungry children and the poor of the world. It was a moment, gotta take this tie off. It was a moment that all over the world people were looking forward to. And then, without being able to take a deep breath and celebrate, what are we looking for? We're looking in absolutely in the festival of yeah! The facts of the matter are, it seems to me, very, very clear. Nobody thinks that Saddam Hussein is going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. The truth of the matter is that the economic pressure is working. It is working. His economy is in serious trouble. Every day, his capability of making war disintegrates when he doesn't have the spare parts. We are winning. The goal of the moment, and it will be an historic development, if international conflict can be resolved by the United Nations by non-violent means. Yeah! That will be historical. Second point, the president is not being honest and straightforward about some of the implications of this war. Let me touch upon them.
No, never.
Number one, he is not being honest about the potential casualties for American soldiers or for the innocent civilians in Iraq. Very little discussion.
Amen.
Number two, let me tell you something. The governor and the legislature here, as is true all over this country, are looking at extraordinary deficits and economic problems. The country is now looking at the largest deficit in its history. The banking system is on the verge of collapse.
Amen.
The healthcare system is not working.
Amen.
The educational system is failing. We need to spend hundreds of billions of dollars rebuilding America, not sending it to the Persian Gulf. The third point, while I believe that Saddam Hussein must be stopped, the third point is we have got to not make phony speeches about defending freedom in the Persian Gulf. I don't have to tell the people here that freedom has nothing to do with the feudalistic dictatorship of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. That has nothing to do with freedom. Last point. If there is a war, and if the United States prevails, how many years are we going to be in Iraq occupying Baghdad in the middle of an Islamic nationalist movement? All right? So let me conclude simply by saying this. I've been in Congress 1 week, and what I want to tell you... I told you during the campaign that Congress is not responsive to the needs of the American people. They're out of touch. What I told you was untrue. It is worse than what I told you. It is very bad. What's going on right now politically is this. Almost all of the Republicans are supporting the president. That's bad. But what is equally bad is the Democrats in my body, the House, have 100-vote plurality. And the likelihood is they're not even going to be able to carry a weak anti-war resolution. Not even able to do that. In the Senate, it looks very close. They're like 47 votes. They need 3 or 4 more. Now, it's important that something be passed, because if at least something is passed, even if it's not good, even if it's weak, it will make it that much more difficult for the president to go forward in this sense. The Constitution, although apparently the president doesn't read the Constitution too often, the Constitution is quite clear that war-making powers rest with the Congress and the Congress alone. If there is a resolution, even a weak one, which states that, and if the president defies that and goes to war on his own, that, my friends, is an impeachable offense.
Nah, don't waste anybody's time.
Okay, so like 50.
But just so that you know. Hi everybody, I'm Zed Zapsky and I lost my hat again. I'm at Gaylor School and I was here at the classroom a little while ago. Maybe I left it in here. Yeah, so where's my hat? I was sitting over here, but it's not there. Maybe the kids threw it in the trash can. No, it's not in the trash can. I was sitting there, no problem. It's not there. Ah, those creeps, they threw it behind the TV. Yes. I am so absent-minded. Off I go to the garden. See you later, folks.
For a while, I was also have been for many years a member of the board of Vermont, and helped NOFA get involved in some legislative issues early on in the Vermont legislature. Through my work in Congressman Sanders' office, still spend a lot of time involved in agricultural and food issues as well, and in fact, we found ourselves in many ways moving deeper and deeper into some of those issues, in part because of the obviously great need, and in part, I think, because we see the contradictions so clearly. When we look at agricultural policy, we see the potential to do the right thing so clear, and in some ways so logical, and maybe even, I would say, so easy. We certainly have the potential to feed everyone, not just in the United States, but throughout the world if we chose to make that decision. And then in Congress, as well as outside of Congress, we find some very blatant roadblocks to our ability to do that, and have decided through, I think, just because of the agenda we have, to see to it that food and agricultural policy be something that we spend a significant amount of time on. What I would like to do today is spend some time talking a little bit about how we got into the mess we are into right now in terms of agricultural and food policy. I think if we're going to talk about where we're going to go or where we want to go, it is important to understand how we got here. Our nation was not always a nation of hungry people. It was not always a nation where family farmers were in such distress. There are specific policy decisions that have brought us to that point. And then what I would like to do is touch a little bit on two issues that are very prominent right now, one having to do with international trade and the current round of GATT negotiations and the impact that that will have on agriculture, but particularly on not just farmers, but on our ability to make decisions about agricultural policy, about pesticide policies, about food security issues. And then perhaps also touch a little bit on some issues around biotechnology, which most of you are probably aware of to some degree, and talk a little bit about where that's coming from and where that may be leading us. So that's what I would like to do. It certainly is, as we go along, I would suggest if people have questions or comments, don't wait until the end, because we may not get to the end. So feel free to make comments or ask questions as we go along, and we can take the discussion in any direction that people may want to take it. Congressman Sanders really cannot stay here very long today. He has to be in White River Junction in about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And so what I thought was maybe we could just have a little discussion with him, if that's okay, before he leaves. So allow him maybe to make a couple of comments, and then have some discussion, maybe some questions and answers with him before he leaves, and then I could jump in and continue to where I would go. I would just begin by saying that you know, our agricultural policy in America is clearly a failure. If you look at what the Farm Bill, what our agricultural policy is supposed to do, the first priority or the first goal is to provide all Americans with an adequate diet. That's the first goal of our farm policy. It's the first goal of the Farm Bill that we debate every 4 years. Clearly, we failed. We are not providing everyone with an adequate diet. The second goal is to provide farmers with economic stability so that they can provide that diet to everyone. Clearly, we're not doing that. We're seeing more and more hungry people and more farmers being pushed out of business. And all I would say, and this is what we can talk about again later, is that this is no accident, that the loss of farms is in fact the policy that is being carried out, and the increased hunger and lack of access to food is very clearly a result of that policy. But don't be mistaken, don't be put under the impression that the loss of farms is something that's happening and nobody understands why and nobody knows how to fix it, because we do know why, and we do know how to fix it, and it is very much a political question as to whether or not we're going to be able to achieve the kind of reforms that we would like, but it's clearly no accident. It is the policy. So I think with that, maybe we'll just I would turn it over to Bernie for a little while, realizing that he has to leave in a couple of minutes.
Okay, let me just say a few things, that maybe if there's some questions that people would like to throw at me, I'd be happy to answer them. Let me pick up on a point that Anthony made. One of the things that concerns me very much as I go around the state, and I do go around the state a whole lot, is that in this country, and I think it's because of the fact that you have two political parties that are essentially one political party, and that you have a media which is corporately owned, which spends billions of dollars to keep people from concentrating on the most important issues affecting their lives, that as a result of those two factors, people don't know very much about what goes on in government and why things don't happen. We are probably the least politically conscious people of any industrialized nation on earth, and certainly that is true in terms of agriculture as well as in a dozen other areas. As Anthony indicated, It is not an accident that family farms all over this country, not only dairy farms in Vermont, but family farms of all kind, are going under. That is not only not an accident, that is government policy. And if you talk to people high up in the agricultural department, as I have, confidentially and off the record, they will acknowledge that. They will acknowledge it in exactly the same way that the Bush administration, the Democrats are not much different, believe that we have too many small banks all over this country, and that what this country needs is a half a dozen huge, multi-zillion-dollar banks to control banking and finance around America. That is also not a secret. That's the goal of the policy. And I think what our job is to understand that and figure out how we can fight back and what our vision is. Let me just touch on a few, and Anthony will go into greater depth in all of these areas later, a few of the issues that we are fighting constantly on a defensive way, just trying to stop more and more havoc being wreaked on farmers. Just give you a couple of areas. Okay, number one, very briefly, you all know that dairy is the main agricultural area in our state. Family farmers are being slaughtered because of the fact that they have lost 25% of their price for milk in the last year, despite the fact that what you pay at the grocery store is still the same thing. Very simple question. If farmers are getting 25% less for their product and you're paying the same price at the store, where is that money going? Where is that money going? And then you get into issues about who controls the price of agricultural products, who controls the cheese production in this country. And then you're talking about very large multinational corporations like Kraft, which are owned by Philip Morris, one of the large conglomerates in the world, having enormous power. Okay. The goal, I think, in terms of dairy policy is to drive family farmers off of the land, to have dairy controlled by a few multinational corporations. Very, very serious problem. The Congress, the President certainly wants to drive family farmers off the land. There's not a whole lot of support in Congress to maintain dairy farming. We're doing the best that we can, but we are very heavily outnumbered. Second of all, an issue that we're just dealing with right now very heavily has to do with biotechnology in agriculture. And you're seeing the beginning of that, the introduction of that, most clearly in terms of BGH, which many of you are familiar with. And let me tell you, my friends, this is very, very heavy-duty stuff. This is the beginning of extraordinarily revolutionary and radical changes in food production. BGH would increase milk production by 20 to 30% by putting great stress on cows. The cows would die younger. It's like a machine that's overworked. The initial studies that we have seen indicate that the cows do not respond well to BGH. There is a much higher rate of mastitis in the cows, and this is, by the way, what the debate is going on as to whether or not the University of Vermont will release the information. Some of you may have seen some of that in the paper. And this takes you, I mean, forget agriculture for a moment, now go to higher education and look at the results, look at the relationship between higher education and multinational corporations. Maybe somebody here can answer the question. I would like you to do it, if you can, to tell me why you think the State University of Vermont should be involved in receiving money from the Monsanto Corporation, a company which is very honest about saying, we want to produce BGH so we can make a whole lot of money, even if it drives farmers in Vermont off the land. Now, why the State University of Vermont should be involved in that type of effort, I don't quite understand. And secondly, why the State University of Vermont should not be revealing all of the information and the data on those studies, I understand even less. I don't know why we're going to have to get a subpoena from Washington to get our state university to release information about the health hazards to cows as a result of those that work. But there you got the tie into the multinational corporations working with agricultural departments within a major university. And this is true all over America. All right. So now you've got a situation, then we're dealing with the FDA in Washington, which presumably is the agency which approves, which will determine whether this product is safe or not. Do you have a whole lot of confidence in the FDA? You shouldn't. Of course you should not. Now also, when you're talking about politics, did you hear President Bush mentioning a couple of weeks ago in the State of the Union addresses to get the economy moving, to get ourselves into a growth mode, we are going to have to relax all of those restrictions which are holding back production and slowing down our economy. Do you know what he's talking about? That's what he's talking about. Those people who want to see whether the products that we are producing are good products, are safe products. We're going to cut back on that. Let's get that BGH out of it. That has to do with the pharmaceutical industry. That has to do with safety in the workplace. That has to do with a dozen different things. That's the connection there between politics and agriculture. Very, very heavy-duty stuff. Now, what's going on there is you almost get out of economics, you get out of agriculture, and you're almost into philosophy and religion. That's what you're into. No, it's very deep stuff. No, I'm like really quite. The question is, I mean, somebody will argue, yeah, what's wrong with stressing out a cow to produce milk if we can get 30% more production from that cow? What's the problem with that? What's the problem with creating crops which are resistant to various types of chemicals? What's the problem with that? Well, I think without getting into great depth, we understand what the product is and what the problem is, and that's where you get into very deep areas. It has to do with a feeling about life, whether or not we believe that there is some kind of natural system, there is a reason to eat food that is naturally grown and drink water that is pure and breathe air that is pure. It's deep stuff. And clearly the people who control this country do not share those values. Well, I expect that most Americans share those values. I have not yet gotten a postcard or a letter from anyone who says that what we really need in this country is cows that can produce 30% more milk or vegetables that are resistant to chemicals. I haven't gotten that letter yet. But what's going on clearly is that whole discussion is being driven by people who have only one goal in mind. That's not the health of our people, that's not the well-being of our people, that's not even the creation of jobs. It's to make as much money as possible for themselves. Yeah.
Well, keeping that goal in mind, that you say that the goal is to make as much money as possible, how do you think they plan on doing this if what they're doing is very unsustained? It would seem to me that their long-term goal, how could their long-term goal be money if within 5 or 10 years we would have an economic collapse? I mean,
Well, you see, that's a fair.
I don't think they have long-term goals, to be
Well,
perfectly honest. I think they have short-term monetary goals, and I don't think they think about the long-term. And I think when you look at issues like biotechnology, or you look at the control of food, number one, they don't have a long-term goal, and number two, they do have a belief that whatever happens, they will be able to mold technology to solve that problem. I mean, right now, using herbicide-tolerant plants as an example, problem is we're killing our crops, and our weeds and our bugs are getting stronger. That's the problem. Their solution is then to develop crops that are able to withstand higher doses of chemicals, so you can put more chemicals on the plant in order to kill the bugs. They feel as if they've solved that problem. Now, they created that problem. They, meaning companies like Monsanto and others. They created that problem. They will solve it through technology. So I mean, you may have different opinions. I don't think they think long-term.
But-
long-term goals, they would be worried about their own health in the future and realize that they could possibly be dying from the things that they're producing now.
But you see, it's an interesting point, and I can't, not being one of those folks, I don't know exactly how they think. But this is what we can say. I mean, for example, we can all look, and I don't want to get into this now, what's happened in the last 12 years of the policies of Reaganomics. And yet what you must understand is that from their point of view, these policies have been extremely successful. The richest people in this country have seen a doubling of their income. It has been very good. And in every area. Are you worried about the quality of education in your school system? Well, if you're a multimillionaire, you don't have to worry about that because you're going to send your kid to the finest private schools. You worried about the fact that you can't afford health care? That's no problem to them. They have the best health care in the entire world. So they are living, if your city, if you're living in New York City or Los Angeles, was ridden with crime, their towns are not ridden with crime. They live in very exclusive enclaves, and they have a lot of police to protect them. So I think what you're looking at is a society where those people, the food they eat, they don't go to the Grand Union to pick up their food, they'll eat better quality food. So their lives, I mean, without getting into, very deep what is the meaning of life and all that stuff, but they can protect themselves from many of these problems which are impacting, several hundred million Americans. Yes?
I'd just like to point out, I do think it's a little bit, I don't know, naive or presumptuous is the right word to think that these people don't have long-term goals. I think what you're pointing to is that they do have long-term goals. Their long-term goals are to preserve the status quo, which they are obviously benefiting from. And I think the questions that seem to be coming up get down to a very basic, fundamental, what you're talking about, moral level. And you have a situation where people who are controlling things have a very different moral, a different value system. And then you have a mass of people, as you're saying, who are disenfranchised, but at the same time, dispirited. So the question is, politically, how do you build a sense of even ability to change? How do you build a sense that you could impose your values on a system? And it's, you know, I'd like to hear your, you know, thoughts on that. Just how do you build a moral sense for people who are basically depressed?
I think you've phrased the question very, very well. There's no question about it. Most of the people don't believe the government is capable of doing anything to improve their lives, and they don't want to participate, and I can't fully blame them. I think the answer is, and I think this state, our small state, may be leading the country in that direction. I don't want to overstate what we're doing. The fact, I mean, in the last couple of weeks, last month anyhow, I have spoken to a variety of groups who are actively involved in various aspects of our lives. Okay, they're not sitting back, whether it's people concerned about food production and organic food, whether it's people who are concerned about community land trust, who are actively fighting for affordable housing. We have, within the next couple of weeks, going to have several hundred people distributing literature in the state of Vermont, fighting for a single-payer healthcare system. So we are bringing, in this state at least, many, many thousands of people to say, hey, this is our state. We can produce healthy food. We can have a quality healthcare system in which every person has access without out-of-pocket expense. That's the goal. The difficulty, let me tell you, because you've asked a good question, the problem is every place people turn, they feel hopeless. Okay? And, you know, when I was mayor of Burlington, one of the nice things we were able to do a little bit is to say, you know what? Government actually can begin to respond. You can build affordable housing. You can have programs for young people. You can respond to the needs of women. And then, you know what? When people see that in a democracy, government actually can reflect what they want, you know what they say? Hey, this is fun. Democracy is really good. Not a bad idea. Maybe I'll participate. Maybe I'll vote. Maybe I'll run for office. The frustration is, and let me tell you, it is extraordinarily cynical. Those people who stand as President of the United States, the leaders of Congress, they don't believe the government can or should do anything. So you might wonder, why the hell do they run for president or run for government when they tell you, government can't do anything, don't ask the government to do anything, okay? And the reason is precisely to tell you, do you think government can deal with health care? Don't be ridiculous, can't do that. Deal with the problem of health, deal with the problem of farm, don't be ridiculous, we don't want to go. And people say, geez, what am I supposed to do? So I think the only point, your statement and your question was an excellent one. What we have to do against overwhelming odds, the most frustrating personal thing that I deal with, I believe in a Canadian-style healthcare system. When I go out all over the state, most people agree with me. But people honestly say, hey, Bernie, what are you kidding? Government can't do anything. I mean, look at Reagan, look at Bush. And what we have to tell people, that's their government that can't do anything. A democratic government with a small d can, in fact, do the right thing, you know, in a democratic society. But you gotta have that faith. If you give up that faith, they have succeeded. If you don't vote, they have succeeded. If you don't run for office, they have succeeded. And that is precisely what they want to see happen. Yeah.
It seems to me that central to all this and back of it all is a question of money.
Yes.
And just a few brief quotes. Galbraith says, the ease with which banks create money repels the mind. And Donnella Meadows lately has been saying how money is sloshing around up in her area. It hurts on the way up, and as it recedes now, it hurts on the way down. You've been on the House Banking Committee now for a year. Do you begin to see any way we can, the reality of this, and or any way we can begin to cope with it? We can't change it.
I don't even want to, I mean, that's a subject that's many hours. Maybe sometime we'll do something on that. What you're looking at, again, this gets back to what is the most personally frustrating thing for me, is to be part of a committee where people who are sitting on both sides of me have received hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars from the SNLs and from the banking committee, and they're the ones who are regulating banking and the SNLs. We can, I mean, the pain is to know that pumping money, and, you know, needless to say, we're trying to do those things, back into the communities development, to do the kinds of things that we've been talking about here. And we're working on a program minimal program. Right now, just to give you an example, the federal government distributes about $600,000 a year in commodities in the state of Vermont. What we want to do is get that money they buy the products, they buy the canned pork, and then distribute it to poor people in Vermont. They buy it, okay? Our feeling is that they should give the money back to the state of Vermont so that we can purchase food products from our own farmers that'll be obviously better quality products. It'll stimulate our own economy. People know what's going on. But to answer your question, in that instance, the fraud is so enormous that you can't even begin to deal with it. The Congress this year voted $95 billion to bail out the institutions that were destroyed by people running the commercial and savings and loan institutions. They didn't even vote on it. $95 billion. Do you know what $95 billion is? No. Okay. You don't know. See, that's part of what the problem is too. You see, it is too much money for people to even know about. What's a couple of $100 billion? Let me just conclude by, that's just too big an area to get into now. Just to tell you that in my view, the problems are solvable. Okay, we have the wealth in this country to do it. And it's a question of a radical change of national priorities. We can do it. You can build the housing that people need. You can produce the food in a decentralized way that people need. You can educate kids locally in a sensible way. You can have a local economy which provides good products for good people. But the people, as the young man here indicated, are powerless. We have very little to say about that, and other people control the agenda. Yeah.
I'd like to approach another mentioned subject, which is hemp. I think this is an opportunity, an agricultural opportunity that's being kept from us by a witch hunt. And it's all part of what you brought up, that it's all one big profit-mongering mess that we're in. We need to, I think from a health standpoint, economic, and, well, many standpoints, let's say, we need to grow a lot more of our food directly rather than feeding it through cattle in the form of animal products. The land that's freed up, we can grow our energy, we can grow our plastics, we can grow our paper in the form of hemp. And this crop was outlawed by timber interests because it was so threatening to their profits. And I realize this is a very dangerous subject for an alternative-minded congressman to bring up. But I'd like to know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I've read just a little bit about it, and there are differences of opinion, as you know, to the economic potential of hemp. What I want to tell you is that in general, you're talking about this as an economic issue, really. I don't know if you were talking about the issue of the legalization of marijuana or things like that. Was that?
All comes together.
Well, I have, my own thought is I don't want to get into a great argument because I don't know the answer whether cigarettes are more dangerous to health than marijuana. Some people say yes and some people say no. I do want to be honest with you and tell you I'm not a great, if the case can be made that marijuana is not more dangerous than cigarettes, then it's somewhat hypocritical to say, well, here's a cigarette, but you can't smoke a marijuana cigarette. That's true. On the other hand, but I'll be very honest with you, I'm not a great fan of drugs and the drug culture, in the sense that I see that in many instances as an escape from reality. You talk about how things are imposed upon people. And I would not be supporting certainly the legalization of drugs, because I think that will be a disaster for millions of people. As an economy exists, where so many people are already outside of the economy, there are many people who are going to say, that's great, let these kids get stoned and live their whole lives being stoned and not participating in the political process. I don't know,
I don't think that's what he's talking about.
Well, I'm not talking, well, first off, I think there's a lot of evidence that alcohol is far more dangerous than marijuana. I think that's pretty clear. And, we had our prohibition in the 20s, that didn't work, and our prohibition in the 80s and 90s is not working either. But hemp can grow 4 times the biomass off 1 acre than forest land can, and it improves the soil while it is doing it. It makes a very superior form of paper without the pollution that normal paper manufacture out of wood pulp creates. It creates very high quality plastics, and many other products. It's an extremely valuable crop. The government grows it in guarded areas because it's irreplaceable for certain things. And it's something that could turn our farm economy around. It could turn our overall economy around, and it could reduce our pollution by a hell of a lot. There's a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. I would recommend you read it.
Send Bernie a copy.
No, I'll be happy to look at it. Other thoughts or questions? Yes.
On a more global level, I was curious about who runs the IMF and the World Bank and who appoints them or elects them.
Well, you touch on it. That was actually, thank you for asking that question, because I was going to, that's certainly one of the problems that farmers are facing, and that has to do with international trade and the internationalization of everything. In the last foreign aid bill, there was a $25 billion foreign aid bill, which for a variety of reasons I voted against. One of the reasons I voted against it is there was $10 billion allocated to the International Monetary Fund. Now, you know, some of you who may be as old as I, most of you are not, will remember 20 or 30 years ago you had these right-wing nuts running around saying that there was going to be an international conspiracy by which a handful of they usually thought they were Jews or communists, would be controlling the world economy. Well, they were not right. It's not Jews, it's not economists, it's not communists. But there are a relatively small number of people who have a tremendous economic power in one country after the other. Just stop for a moment. What goes on with the IMF is that for a poor country now to get the kinds of loans and aids they need, the aid that they need, they have to sit down with the IMF, and the IMF says, well, you're putting too much money into education, you're subsidizing food production, you're doing this for poor people. That's not what the private sector really requires. We want you to end all of your subsidies, we want you to cut back on your state programs, and open up your country to foreign investment. And if you do all of that, we're going to give you loans and grants. That's what the IMF is about, and that's what the World Bank is about. What is absolutely extraordinary, it doesn't get written about a whole lot. Throughout Latin America, and now moving into the former Soviet republics, that is what is going to happen. You're going to have a relatively small number of people making tremendous economic decisions for ostensibly independent countries. Very dangerous trend. I mean, the people who control the IMF are very large banks and very wealthy people. That should not be a secret. The United States contributes a significant amount of money to the IMF.
So are they appointed by their own body, or?
I can look. I mean, they'll come from the very highest levels of the banking commercial.
So it's a private enterprise.
Yeah. Heavily funded by public money. Very, very dangerous institution. Yeah, back there.
Bernie, what's happening legislatively to support sustainable agriculture, low-input sustainable agriculture, and rural community development? Are there any positive things coming out of Congress on this? Is anything, I mean, the broader question is, should we even be looking to Congress for anything at this point?
I mean, the answer is sure. I mean, you don't hold your breath, but there's no reason.
I mean, probably Grace and a few other people here might know more about this than I or Bernie do, in the sense of.
Are there any bills that we should be watching and supporting?
I mean, the honest answer, unless Grace knows something specifically related to organics, the honest answer is no. I mean, what we're trying to do right now in terms of agricultural policy, I think, are two things. One is unfortunately, we're being defensive at this point in trying to put the skids on what is happening right now and to be able to turn it around. Most of the most progressive proposals in Congress around agriculture are merely proposals that say we should slow down the loss of farms, create some stability, and there are various ways in which people talk about doing that maybe we could talk about in more detail if people are interested. The other little tidbit, as some of you know, for instance, is that, again, going back to herbicide-tolerant plants, in the 2 years previous to this one, the federal government spent more money researching herbicide-tolerant plants than they spent on sustainable agriculture. And you do know that there has been some LISA money that Congress has put forth, I guess, 2 years ago or within the last 2 years. There was a major infusion of LISA funds, low input sustainable ag funding.
It was voted as a major infusion.
But was
The
not
actual
funded,
funding was
right.
just flat.
So, I mean, the real answer is, in a sense, is no. There are a lot of efforts that went into the Farm Bill debate last session many of which came out of the sustainable ag working groups around the country, which looked at how we can take crop farmers and have them be more sustainable, allowing crop rotations, and still allow yourself to be a part of the federal commodity programs. You know, that you don't have to plant corn every year to get your deficiency payment. You could actually rotate your crops. There were some very, very minor changes that were made in that direction. Really what we have to do is on the one hand, is to slow down the loss of farms, but we need to do a lot more work on building a political base in Congress that says we're going to do anything other than that. I know it's not the answer that people want to hear, but it is the honest answer.
And the other thing that we're trying to do, given the fact that there are 5 million kids who are hungry every day in America, is to significantly increase the amount of money that goes to a variety of food programs, whether it's the WIC program or the food stamp program or the breakfast program or the lunch program, and then to develop a mechanism by which, instead of having the federal government, in some instances, say with the commodities program, buying products and then sending them to Vermont, give us the cash so that we can buy locally and in that way help decentralized agriculture.
And I think two things. One is that a lot of people in Congress, as well as a lot of people in corporate America, see biotechnology and genetic engineering as sustainable agriculture of the future. And I know that there's a major internal debate as to whether that is potentially there's some sustainable uses for biotechnology. But that is where the research money is going. Every major corporation is now funding research on every major crop. I mean, everything from potatoes to petunias to poplar trees. To try to engineer them in various ways, perhaps where either they'll be resistant to herbicides, where they will kill the bugs themselves. You know, the bug eats the broccoli leaf and the bug dies. They're really talking about ignoring the laws of nature and redefining nature in such a way that sustainability will come through genetic engineering. And the other thing to keep in mind, and this was an eye-opener for me, although it seems like it shouldn't have been, but back in '85, '86, when we first started going to Washington and talking about, you know, slowing down the loss of dairy farms particularly, you know, in 1986 in America, according to the American Bankers Association, we lost a farm every 4 minutes in 1986, and we spent $26 billion on what they called farm subsidies and what we called corporate welfare, and I could explain how that works if people are interested. But we would go down there and we would say, Mr. Senator, Mr. Congressman, we're losing a farm every 4 minutes. There's a problem here. We better do something. And every single one of them sat back and said, no, you don't understand. You're naive. They said, the policy is working just fine. We just have to let it run its course. Under the 1985 Farm Bill, which went from 85 to 90, we lost over 500,000 farms. The majority of people in Congress will tell you that's the best farm bill we ever had. And when they tried to write the 1990 Farm Bill, the Congressional Budget Office developed a study to show Congress what would happen if we continued the present policy. If we took the 85 Farm Bill and continued it into the 1990 Farm Bill, the CBO said if you do that, net farm income is going to drop by 20% and you're going to lose farms 3 times faster in the 90s than in the 80s. They gave that report to Congress. What did Congress do? Congress essentially passed a continuation of the 85 Farm Bill, knowing that the Congressional Budget Office told them exactly what was going to happen. So again, it's not as if it's a secret and people in Congress are scrambling around to try to figure out how to fund sustainable agriculture. The corporations are going to do that, and the role of Congress is to get rid of the dead weight, to get rid of the smaller, less efficient farmers so that the corporate agenda can be more easily implemented.
I wanted to
Grace?
bring up some
You're
of
gonna
the
have to go. Yeah.
politics that went on around the passage of the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990 that became part of the Farm Bill, which was significant because it brought together, for one thing, it was a victory for the grassroots organizing that went on nationwide. All the small organic organizations like NOFAs around the country really were able to be brought together and influence their congresspeople so strongly that they couldn't leave it out. It was the one part of the Farm Bill that actually had to come to a vote on the floor of the House and was approved against the vote of the House Agriculture Committee, which is like an unheard of thing. The House Agriculture Committee voted against it, and the vote on the floor of the House supported it, went into the Farm Bill. The other reason that was able to pass was because of a really good organizing effort in terms of bringing in the environmental and the consumer advocacy organizations, and that coalition is still intact and watchdog the implementation of the process, which is a whole other can of worms. I mean, they just appointed the National Organic Standards Board, which is going to actually be the body that writes the fine print rules and regulations that are going to determine whether we can still call ourselves organic farmers, right? And, you know, there are 15 slots, they appointed 14 of them. I don't know all of the details of everybody, I just looked at the list briefly last night, but I guess, for example, one of these slots set aside for consumer advocacy position is filled by somebody who represents the American Meat Institute. So there's a lot more, a lot more politicking going on here, and the whole question of what's going to become of organic agriculture as we know it now that it's becoming institutionalized. There's a guy who represents beech nut baby foods on this National Organic Standards Board.
Yeah, there was a whole debate, as certainly Grace and a lot of other people know, as to do we want national organic standards? Is this something we want the federal government to be involved in, or is this something that groups should be doing on a state-by-state basis where they at least have control of it at the grassroots level? And there was a lot of different feelings about whether or not we wanted the federal government involved in that kind of decision making. The other point that Grace makes that I think is really key is the coalition building that's necessary to make any of this happen. Bernie mentioned the work we're doing to build links between farmers and consumers, or particularly low-income consumers. The Food Action Resource Center does all this work on WIC and on food stamps. It's a good organization in Washington. And I called them up and I started talking to them about the way dairy policy works, or about some of the other issues related to agriculture. And they're like, oh, well, we didn't know that. You know, I said, you know, they're telling dairy farmers there's a surplus, and they're telling you there's no more surplus milk. What do you think about that? And it's a surprise to them because those links haven't been built.
Let me just jump in here. I'm going to just make the statement, ask if there's another question or two, and then head out the door. Just to pick up on Anthony's point. Our political culture is so bankrupt, and our political consciousness is so low, that you can even have circumstances where very, very decent people who are fighting for milk for poor kids are being dragged by the Bush administration to oppose the expansion, to expose decent dairy policy for family farmers. Because the line from the Bush administration is, cost of milk is going to go up, there's only a limited amount of money available, that means there'll be less milk for your kids who you're fighting for. And with that they can actually get away with that, and they've had some success, indicates our inability to create a political movement which brings various groups together. And to me, whether you're talking about the issues that you've raised today, the need to grow healthy food in a decentralized way and to stand up to corporate agriculture, you're talking about healthcare, a problem I suspect many farmers, many people involved in agriculture in this room. Whether you're talking about education, we're talking about big environmental questions, is we're not going to be successful unless we bring people together and develop a political agenda. All right, the point that Grace just made is that we won a victory. Before I was in the Congress, a victory was won. That could be taken away. Half of the victories that you think you win, we're going to do this, right? And who is going to appoint the people to administer that? Dan Quayle. That's serious. I'm quite serious. They understand that. Literally, most of the time, you got to follow these things through. They have the power, and in the name of organic farming, they'll appoint people whose job is to destroy what you consider to be organic farming. And you ultimately, what we have to understand politically, and this gets down to very basic politics, you're not going to win tomorrow. You may win a victory over here, you may win a victory over there. But ultimately, what you have to do is put together a movement. You have to ask yourselves the hard questions. You don't like the Republican Party and the president, what do you think about the Democratic Party? And if you don't like the Democratic Party, by the way, and I say this, I know that's not the issue of the day here. I'm not here to talk politics in that sense. But to suggest to you that everything is related. Democratic Party controls 100-vote plurality in the House, 12-vote plurality in the Senate. What are you seeing coming out of the House and Senate that makes you all very excited about it? And if those parties aren't working, then what do? You just say, well, go it alone, I'm going to change my own life. Yeah, maybe.
What about a revolution against the whole system?
Fine, but then what does that mean? Yeah. You know, David Duke is talking about a revolution against getting rid of the welfare cheaters, right? That's a revolution against the system. Racism is a revolution in a certain sense against the system. What are you talking about? How do you bring it about? Hard questions which we don't spend enough time talking about. So my ideas in that sense are fairly conservative. I think you need a third political party which raises these values that you have raised here today, that talks about, do you believe that all people are entitled to health care? Yeah, I think most people here do. Do you think you should spend $300 billion on the military now that you don't have a major enemy in the world? Most people in this room and throughout the country don't think so. But those issues have got to be thrown into the hopper. You're not going to succeed. I mean, we see this, and I think the point that you made, the point that Anthony made, unless you have the power. Our ideas are relatively, we have no power within the White House. I would say you have 7-8% of the members of the Congress who can sit down with you and discuss common ideas. And yet, half the people don't vote. So I think as I leave, what I like you to think about is that we're not going to be successful in developing the common agenda that many of us believe in unless you get involved in that distasteful, dirty world of politics, which does not have to be dirty. It can be democratic if it's done in the right way. So I would urge all of you, who I know have very deep concerns about the environment and agriculture, to get deeply involved. Okay, thanks a lot.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Anthony, I wanted you to just talk about,
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Congressman Sam just talking about how difficult it is to deal with the Democratic or Republican Party. You talk a little bit about dealing with GATT, which doesn't even exist anywhere.
Right.
And trying to explain to us how it might affect us in Vermont.
Okay, we can do that. And I don't know how much people know, so I'll start at the beginning and let me know if you want to move in one particular direction or another. But clearly, as we all have gotten a sense, what we've seen in recent years in the United States as well as elsewhere is the control of production in the hands of fewer and fewer companies, or fewer and fewer corporations, in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And that's a phenomena that happened here in the United States, but it certainly has been happening around the world, where to right now, for instance, in the United States, or actually worldwide would be more appropriate to say it, there are about 5 companies that control the grain trade. They control 96% of the corn in the world, or the wheat in the world, 95% or so of the corn, 60% of the soybeans are basically all controlled by about 4 to 5 companies. And I would be willing to bet that perhaps other than one company, that most of us don't even know the names of what these companies are. You think of, General Foods, Del Monte. And then when you look closely, what you see is Del Monte is a subsidiary of one company, which is a subsidiary of another company, which is a subsidiary of another company. The biggest agribusiness corporation in America right now, the one most directly involved in food processing, is Kraft/General Foods. They control probably, half of the brands or more that you see when you go down the grocery store aisle. You think there's competition, you think you've got a choice. Well, they're all owned basically by the same group of people. As Bernie mentioned, Kraft General Foods is owned by Philip Morris. And we know that Philip Morris, amongst other things, is a huge tobacco conglomerate. It's the largest consumer goods corporation in the world. And they're not out there for humanitarian reasons. They're not out there to feed the hungry or support family farmers. They're out there to make money. What has happened in recent years is countries, for various reasons, have developed agricultural policies that will lead them, they hope, towards some degree of self-reliance or self-sufficiency. And this is where the GATT comes in. What we find is the same corporations that are controlling production and distribution here in the United States also control it in other countries. The 5 corporations that I mentioned are primarily American-based corporations. They don't just control the wheat and the corn and the soybeans in the United States. They control it in other countries as well. They control the international marketplace. Now, they've become frustrated because while they've exerted their control as far as they can, they find that they run into barriers or stumbling blocks along the way. And an example of that might be where Thailand might decide that Thailand is going to put a tax on rice that comes into Thailand because that's important to their economy. They don't want U.S. rice imported into Thailand. You certainly are aware of the debate that goes on with Japan over, we have to make Japan import more American food. Japan has all these trade barriers that's standing in the way of them importing more of our food. What they don't tell you is that Japan imports more of our food than anybody else in the world does. And what they don't tell you is that Japan already imports over half of its caloric intake. And so Japan is trying essentially to defend itself from having to become more dependent on multinational corporations, which are primarily American-based, for their food, because that doesn't only give you economic power, but it certainly gives you political power if you control the food supply. And the Japanese will tell you that they remember what happened to them when President Carter embargoed soybeans to Japan, and the kind of problem that was for them. You know, they eat a lot of soybeans, a lot of tofu in Japan. They don't produce very many soybeans in Japan. They import them from the United States. So we do the same thing as well. For our dairy farmers, for instance, and that might be the best example to use, we have two programs for our dairy farmers. One is the price support program, which theoretically helps keep the price up for dairy farmers. It doesn't work. What it does essentially is keep the price down, because we set a floor price which is too low for them to make a living. But we have a price support program, and we also have a dairy import quota program where we strictly limit the amount of imports that come in, dairy imports that come into our country, to about 2% of what we consume. The other example that GATT is going to affect, it has to do with importing foods with high levels of pesticides on them. You know, we do not allow the import into the United States or the sale of food that have DDT residues, as an example. So what's happened is within the GATT, about 6 years ago, the Reagan administration put forth a proposal to the international community to bring agriculture under GATT rules. Now, GATT is an organization that has existed since about 1945, which purpose is to liberalize world trade, to create more world trade.
What does GATT stand for?
General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. They operate out of Brussels and they operate out of Geneva. And if you think it's hard to affect Congress, or you think it's hard to affect people in Montpelier, try to have an impact on an organization that meets in Geneva. And it gets very, very difficult when you start putting in for your travel reimbursements to get there to do your lobbying. But the important thing to remember is when GATT was first instituted back in the 1940s, they specifically left agriculture out of the GATT. And they did that because they said, and they was the United States at the time, said that food was too important a commodity to put out there into the vulnerability of the world marketplace. And they said that every country in the world had the right to develop its own food policies. And every country had the right to try to become more self-reliant in food. Therefore, food was essentially exempt, or agriculture was essentially exempt from GATT decision-making. GATT will tell us, well, Japan is dumping too many cars on the world market, or their so-and-so is dumping too many computer chips on the world market. So GATT tries to resolve those kinds of disputes through these panels they institute that make these decisions. And what happened during the Reagan administration was they decided to bring agriculture under the GATT. And essentially what the effort there to do is to put agriculture out into the world marketplace, to break down barriers that get in the way of multinational corporations that want to trade between countries. Now, the U.S. proposal before the GATT relative to agriculture really has two major components that people need to be aware of. The first is the original U.S. position, and it really hasn't changed, although the negotiations are going on and you see different proposals. The original U.S. position was to phase out all farm programs in the United States and around the world, to phase them out over a period of 10 years. So the price support program that we have would essentially be phased out. It would have to be lowered. Price supports would have to be lowered every year until after 10 years they were gone. Of course, after 2 or 3 years they would be low enough to where they would essentially be gone anyway. If in fact we were to move to that kind of world market pricing program, the price for dairy producers here would be somewhere between $8 and $9 a hundredweight would be the price that they would receive. And right now, as you might know, they're getting $12 to $13. Cost about $13, between $13 and $14, depending on where you are, to produce a hundredweight of milk. Farmers are already getting less than what it costs them to produce it. And under the GATT proposal for dairy particularly, we'd see the prices drop dramatically, and we would see basically the elimination of many, many more farmers in the name of free market, free trade. It's very unpatriotic to say that you don't support free trade, and what you have to do is talk about, well, we'd like to see fair trade, there's other ways to have trade. The European community, which has been one of the major opponents of the U.S. position on this, has said, well, from our point of view, we support free trade. From our point of view, free trade means we have the freedom to buy and sell what we want to buy and sell. if we don't want to buy your soybeans or we don't want to buy your beef that was produced with hormones, that's our right. In an atmosphere of free trade, we're free to buy, but we're free to say no. The United States and the multinationals see it very differently. To them, free trade means we produce it, we can export it, you got to buy it. And it became very clear a couple of years ago when the European community said they were not going to import any more beef that was produced with hormones. Now, they gave the United States and other countries 3 years to prepare for that process. They said 3 years from now, we're not going to import this beef anymore. The U.S. did nothing in terms of developing an alternative product. When the day came, the European community said, well, as of, next week, no more U.S. beef with hormones. And the United States said, you can't do that. And you can't do that because that's a barrier to free trade. We produce this stuff. We want to sell it there. You can't prove to us that there's anything wrong with it, of course, because we're not going to accept your proof anyway. Therefore, you cannot keep it out of your country. And if you try to keep it out of your country, it's going to be a barrier to the negotiations that are now going on in the GATT, which are meant to provide, free access across borders. Now in Texas, when Jim Hightower was still commissioner down there at this time, what they did was they said, okay, Europeans don't want to buy beef with hormones. We're going to develop, we're going to produce beef without hormones, and we're going to export to the European community, which is what people in Texas started to do. But it was an example of where the United States says, we produce it, we think it's okay, therefore you cannot say that you will not import this. They're going to say the same thing if the negotiations pass or if the agreement passes. They're going to say the same thing when the United States says, we're not going to buy vegetables from Mexico with DDT on it. They're going to say, oh no, you can't make that decision. You cannot ban the import of food with DDT into your country unless the whole world, through the GATT, decides that DDT is bad. And the U.S. has announced who they think should make these decisions. It will be an organization called Codex Alimentarius, which is based in Rome, sort of a quasi-scientific organization with affiliations to the various governments. The United States gets represented there by the USDA and Coca-Cola and the National Grocers Association. Codex is going to make these decisions. Codex is already, we know what Codex standards are. They don't think DDT is very bad. They don't think most of the chemicals that we limit are very bad, and they would allow very high limits. We would not be able to keep those products out of our country if, in fact, the agreement goes the way the Bush administration would like to see it go. They call that harmonization. See, they don't say we're going to make you eat bad food. They're going to harmonize health and safety standards. Now we happen, as bad as they may be, sometimes in the United States, we happen to have fairly reasonable standards compared to countries like Mexico and others. Clearly they're not going to make Mexico raise its standards to be in harmony with ours. That's not the idea. The idea is to get us to lower our standards so that we're at a least common denominator so that corporations will have an easier time crossing borders. If Del Monte makes tomatoes in Mexico where they can pay people $2 a week, as opposed to trying to produce it in the United States where it may cost you more, Del Monte wants to go and make tomatoes in Mexico. They want to be able to use DDT in Mexico. They want to be able to bring those vegetables back to the United States. They don't want anything standing in the way. So they call that harmonization. And an interesting example of what's going to happen there happened, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago now, maybe less. But a little while ago, the United States, through Marine Mammal Protection Act, the United States said we would not import tuna that was caught in the nets that kill dolphins. Something that Congress actually approved of that. Congress said we will not import that tuna anymore. Well, the GATT brought together, that was challenged, the GATT brought together a panel of 3 people who looked at that and said, no, the United States cannot make that decision because that is a barrier to free trade. They said you cannot use a trade or an economic measure to make a point about the environment or some endangered species, and they're going to say the same thing about BGH or DDT or any of the other chemicals that people may not want to have on their food in the United States right now. They also said particularly that the United States couldn't make that decision about any fish that was caught outside our own limits. Like if we wanted to tell our own fisher people, that they couldn't catch dolphins that way, that might be okay. They didn't even say that would be okay, they said that might be okay. But you clearly could not institute such a measure, even though your Congress wanted to, because it was a barrier to people who were catching tuna, in nets with dolphins. They caught it, they have a right to sell it. You don't have a right to say no, that you don't want that product anymore. And that's the kind of decisions that they're going to be making if, in fact, the harmonization aspect of this passes. Sure. Oh, yeah. Sure. You will definitely have the ability to go in the store and say no to whatever products you want. That's what we all have to keep in mind, is essentially the marketplace is going to dictate what people put on those shelves. The only problem with that, well, I agree with what you're saying, is you got a factor of competition, okay? And if the tuna comes in with the dead dolphins and it's selling for, whatever, $1 a can, and the tuna, that you produce, that you catch in some other way is there in a much more expensive way, it's just going to be a problem for some people. And then you also have the problem of who controls what's on the supermarket shelves. I mean, people who might be familiar with things like the Cherry Hill Cannery, or anybody who's grown produce and tried to get it into the Grand Union, knows that there are some, what we said about General Foods, controlling half the brands you see on the store shelves. They also control what goes on those shelves. And so you're right, it is up to the consumer, but it's also right that the GATT proposals as written will preempt the ability of nations and states and localities to make those overall decisions for themselves. Ross?
And I also might add that consumers won't necessarily know that one product is safe and one is not. And I wonder how this is going to affect our ability to label our products.
Right. Labeling will actually be seen as a barrier to trade. I mean, just like organic standards will be seen as a barrier. In other words, you're setting certain standards and you're differentiating one product from another in a way that someone will feel is going to have a detrimental economic impact on them.
It's the same thing, just like emissions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other, I'm sorry, do you have your hand up?
Oh, well, actually, she brought up part of the point that I was going to. What you're painting is a very gloomy picture for us in some ways, but we do have the power to bring together locally, as this conference is focusing on, and a lot of other meetings are focusing on right now. We have the ability to, through education, partly create our local markets, and sometimes we just have to change the overall picture from a very small grassroots basis.
No, I think it's becoming more and more clear that there are those of us who get paid and spend our lives trying to fight with Congress and the GATT, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everybody. First of all, it's not a very rewarding job because progress is very, very, very slow. And what it is it makes it more important that people develop projects or strategies on the local level that would counteract what the decisions that are being made on higher levels. A lot of us would argue that part of the thinking behind bringing agriculture under the GATT was in fact a reaction on the part of the Reagan administration and corporations to the fact that more and more states were making these decisions. Back a year and a half or so ago, when in California they were debating this Big Green proposal, which would have banned, very radical, right? It would ban cancer-causing chemicals from food. That's chemicals that have been proven to cause cancer in animals would not be allowed to be used on food for people. And then our then Secretary of Agriculture, Clayton Yoder, who previous to that was our trade representative who wrote these proposals, went to California and said, you cannot pass this proposal in California because, number one, it's a violation of what we're after in the GATT. And then he said, how are we going to make the point that we're going to harmonize things on the international level if we have states running off and doing these various things on the local level? So, it really is a reaction on their part to the fact that in many ways those of us who have been working on these issues, have been making progress on the local level, and they're trying to find ways to override that progress, legally. But again, we have the power to change that situation by exerting our power on the grassroots level and developing not just educational but economic programs that will work. The idea with what Bernie mentioned about, Vermont gets $600,000 worth of, some of which is surplus food and some of which is food the federal government buys to give to poor people, and they buy canned beans and they buy peanut butter and they buy canned pork, basically. Why not give us that money and let us decide what to do with it so we can contract with
My name is Ellen Axel. First of all, let's just have a hand for all the people that made this event possible. It's a great, this is a great turnout, and I hope none of you forget to vote, obviously, in November. Complacency is our biggest enemy in this campaign. So, without further ado, I would like to ask Bernie to address us, the only independent congressman, and we've elected him how many times? 4 times, and hopefully a 5th time. So.
Thank you, Ellen. And thank you, Jill. And thank you, Elizabeth. And thank all of you very much for coming out this evening. This is a great turnout. I think, as Ellen just said a moment ago, and I think Elizabeth said it as well, the great problem that exists in our society today is that tens of millions of people are giving up on the political process. They no longer believe in it. They no longer think that their vote makes a difference. They no longer believe that their government is listening to their needs. And while many of those thoughts are true, the answer is not to vote, not to participate, not to get active. In fact, the answer is that now, more than ever, people have got to be involved in the political process, not only fighting for their rights, but for the rights of all of these kids over here. This country has enormous potential, but we have not come anywhere close to reaching that potential. This is a wealthy nation, but it is wrong that the richest 1% of the population owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. It is wrong that the wealthiest one person, one man in America owns more wealth than the bottom 100 million Americans. It is wrong that at a time in which we have seen a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, the United States of America has the dubious distinction of having the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, with 22% of our kids living in poverty. Now, the reason that the rich get richer and that the middle class shrinks and that so many of our kids live in poverty is that we have not been actively organized in taking on the big money interests who to a very large degree control the economic and political life of this country. If we want to make sure that workers earn a decent wage, if we want to have a national health care system that guarantees health care to all people, if we want a tax system that is fair, that asks those who have the money to start paying their fair share of taxes so we don't have to overtax the middle class or working families, if we want to protect our environment and women's rights, if we want to do all of those things, you don't have the luxury of not being involved in the political process. Because let me tell you something, Newt Gingrich and his big money friends want nothing more than for people to not vote, to not participate, and to give up in the system. And you know why? Because they don't go to events like this. This is not the political type events they go to. They go to events where they have fundraisers for $50,000 a plate. And their friends pour hundreds of thousands of dollars not only into the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well. And that's the system that they want. And the way to beat that system is for people to stand up, develop a progressive agenda, come together and fight for our rights, fight for the environment, fight for the children. Let me very briefly touch on some of the important issues that are out there that we all have got to be involved with. Number one, campaign finance reform. It is an obscenity
that the wealthiest 1/4% of Americans contribute 80% of the money that goes into the political process. It is obscene that Philip Morris and tobacco companies and big money interests pour in huge sums of money to both political parties. What we need is to eliminate soft money, independent expenditures, and limit the amount of money that a candidate can spend in an election. And if you do that, my God, you know what you might have? And that is a fair election. A fair election in which working people can participate and can vote for candidates that represent them rather than billionaires. So that's number one. Number two, we've got to expand and protect the safety net. There is a war going on right now, not only against the kids, but against the elderly as well. How many of you know that last year, $115 billion was cut from Medicare, and we're seeing the impact of that in Vermont right now with cutbacks in home health care, where the agencies are unable to do the quality of work they have historically done. And you know what happened to that $115 billion? Do you think it went to deficit reduction, to balancing the budget? Forget it. Most of that money went for tax breaks for the very wealthy. 3/4 of that money went for tax breaks for people earning $100,000 a year or more. You take from Medicare, you give to the wealthy who don't need it. Does that make sense to you? You're darn right it doesn't. And what about our national priorities? Where is our money going? We are spending $270 billion on the military despite the end of the Cold War. We spend $2 billion on each B-2 bomber. We spend $125 billion on corporate welfare. We give tax breaks to zillionaires. And yet, when our veterans need help at the VA hospital, there's just no money available. When our home health care agencies need help, we have cut back on them. When our kids need help for education and middle-class families are searching for a way to send their kids to college, there's no money available. So we've got to get our priorities right, use the resources of this great country for the middle class, the working people, and low-income people, and not for the people on top. They've got it all, and enough is enough. We have got to raise the minimum wage. A couple of years ago, Mr. Gingrich and his friends said, you're never going to raise the minimum wage above $4.25 an hour. That's plenty. Hey, that's really a lot of money. You can go out, raise a family on $4.25. Well, 2 years ago, we took on Gingrich and his friends. We raised the minimum wage, and has had an impact that for the first time in many years, our lowest income workers are actually seeing a little bit more money. But is it enough? Is $5.15 an hour enough? No, it is not enough. It is wrong that millions of families, often single mothers trying to raise kids, are trying to make it on $5.15 an hour. So when we get back to Washington next week, high on the agenda is to raise the minimum wage so that no working person in this country works 40 hours a week and lives in poverty. And while we talk about workers' rights, we must talk about changing radically our absurd trade policies. This year, we're going to have a record-breaking $200 billion trade deficit. And what that is about is that large corporations in America, Nike and all of the rest, throw American workers out on the street. They run to China. You know what the wages are in China? Anyone know? What are the wages in China? 20 cents an hour. So they throw American workers out on the street, they run to China, they hire people there, and they bring their products back into this country, and they make huge profits. All of us want to see the standard of living of people in the third world go up. But the way to raise the incomes of people in the third world is not to lower the wages and the income of American workers. So what many of us believe in is not quote-unquote free trade, but fair trade.
We want to make sure that our trade policies, whether they're NAFTA, most favored nation status with China, GATT, or anything else, represent the interest of American workers and not just the heads of the large corporations. And lastly, let me say a word on an issue that has not been getting a whole lot of discussion lately. 4 years ago, there was a whole lot of debate in this country on health care. You remember the issue of health care? And in the last 4 years, you know what has happened? The situation has gotten not better, it has gotten worse. More people have no health insurance. More people are underinsured. More people are paying higher deductibles and co-payments. Is it too much to ask that the United States join every other industrialized nation on earth and have a national health care system which guarantees health care to all of its people? I don't think it's too much to ask. And what all of you should know is that our current inefficient health care system costs far more money per capita than any other health care system on earth. We spend twice what the British do, far more than almost every other country on earth, and 40 million Americans end up without any health insurance, and many more are underinsured. But creating a national health care system touches on the first point that I made. It ain't going to happen unless people come together and are emboldened and are prepared to take on the insurance companies and the drug companies and the people who profiteer off of health insurance. So let me simply conclude in the way that I began. The truth of the matter is we're not only fighting to win this election, but more importantly, we're fighting to preserve American democracy. We're fighting so that these kids know what democracy is about and understand that the government of the United States and the state of Vermont is supposed to represent their interests, that they should feel welcome and comfortable about getting involved in the political process and not be intimidated because big money interests can buy 30-second negative ads. So I implore you for your help in this campaign, for myself, for Elizabeth, for the other progressive candidates that are out there. We need your help. We need your help knocking on doors, making telephone calls, using the bumper stickers that we are going to be distributing tonight, putting up the lawn signs that we have. Please stand up not only for Bernie Sanders and the other progressive candidates, but stand up for democracy, make your voice heard, and let Vermont be the shining beacon for this whole country, and that at least in our state, we're going to have candidates representing ordinary people and not the big money interests. Thank you very much.
How you doing, Steve? Thank you. Thank you. Stay down. We should talk. I'm not going to give up on that idea. Okay. Okay, we can tell. Great. Thank you. Thinking you spoke about
One more small announcement, just to let you know, we do have Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and we're going to get that ready soon. So don't leave, and we're going to have more music very soon. So please stay and enjoy the party.
what Congress is doing right now to address those problems.
Well, the Republican-controlled majority in Congress has been not very forgiving in the social and the cost of college. They believe that balancing the budget is more important than keeping our young people afloat and going to college. They've been really selfish in that.
Any other thoughts on that? Okay, let me ask you another question. We have heard from a number of the panels today a great concern, and it was interesting to see so many people stand up and say, yes, we are going to need help from the government or from some other source in order to go to college. Given that reality, is it your judgment that the students themselves have been effective politically in fighting for more federal aid to education? Have they done a good job in making their concerns known to their elected officials?
I think a lot of them aren't of age to really make an impact because of their age. They're not old enough to vote and really vote for the candidates that will help raise the financial aid. President Clinton is trying the best he can, but with the Congress being so closed-minded in some respects, we don't have a say. I mean, I imagine that probably half of us here aren't of voting age and won't be until the next election, and still.
But one of the things that I would like you to think about today, not only with regard to these issues, but all the other issues, is even if you don't vote, and many of you are not 18, can you have an impact on the process? So let me ask somebody else that question. Even though you can't vote, how can you get these concerns out in the public eye and have people respond to them?
I think financial aid should be a bigger campaign issue. I mean, it's not really a campaign issue that candidates run on. They run on balancing the budget or saving the environment or military spending. Nobody runs on financial aid as their issue. And I think if the candidates would recognize that and put it in their main issue, it might be better.
Okay. Any of the other people up there want to comment on that? Okay, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Brattleboro 5.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is David Smith, and I will be talking about campaign finances. A couple of days ago, I heard two men laughing about the term representation of the people, claiming that the people are no longer really represented. Unfortunately, I'm beginning to agree with this because I have a problem believing that a politician is going to think about me, the average voter, when the oil and gas industry gives Congress $17 to $18 million annually, when the health industry gives $68.8 million, the banking industry gives $42.1 million, and that's just to name a few. Our government is overrun by the influences of special interest groups, industries, corporations, unions, and other big spenders. But you, the politicians, are also stuck because the average House election is up way past $550,000. The average Senate election is up past $3.5 million. And that's average, which means that the backwater small-time candidate has no chance of competing with the mainstream Republican or Democrat because he or she has no corporate or big spender backing. In short, our campaign finance system is outdated, flawed, and full to the brim with loopholes. We need changes. What I'm proposing today is a publicly financed system. My proposal starts in September, 8 months before an election, with candidates collecting low-dollar contributions. This is the only private money in my whole system. And since it's low dollar, it doesn't have any influence over a candidate. This seed money, lasts until the first primary in February. To qualify for public financing, candidates must receive 20% of the vote. Parties may also qualify for public financing by getting 20% of the vote between two candidates and setting their most winningest candidate to run. Candidates who receive the required vote will receive an account of money to work with. In addition to monetary funds, the candidates will also receive radio and TV space. Instead of getting 45-second sound bites, candidates will receive 15-minute blocks, almost like infomercials, and this will force them to really discuss in detail their platforms, and you can also get debates going, and really educate the public. Lastly, the government will pay for 1 or 2 mass mailings per candidate. Winners of the national conventions will then be given money to campaign in the general election. Now, how are we going to pay for this? The Working Group on Electoral Democracy estimated that a plan similar to this one would cost between $500 to $600 million annually. And I've devised 2 ways to pay for this. The first is a $6 flat tax on every tax-paying American. Unfortunately, the taxpayers don't really want another tax. So an alternative plan would be a $1 checkoff box on the tax returns for congressional funding, right next to the one for presidential funding. Also, a 1% shift in funds from the military to campaign finances. And last, the first national lotto game. Vermont alone already receives around $23 million in funds from various lotto games, and I think that a national lottery game could bring in at least half of the money needed to fund this campaign system. What this system will do is it'll do 5 things. First, it'll stop all public legislation from being influenced by the wealth of industries, the wealth of corporations, unions. All private money will be taken out of politics. Second, it creates a level playing field for all candidates. Rich and poor candidates must have the same chance of being elected as everyone else. And voters must start to elect candidates on their merit, not on their money. Thirdly, it allows politicians to spend their time at politics, not at campaigning. I've heard that politicians spend anywhere between 40 to 80% of their time campaigning. In this system, they would spend 5% of their time campaigning. It will allow politicians to get in touch with what voters want, not with what the heavy contributors want. If politicians have to go to the grassroots to get their support, then they'll be more in touch with what the real voters want. Finally, it closes down all loopholes so that no private money can influence the public system, and we will return to the ideal of representation of the people.
Thank you. You touched upon a very important issue. David, let me ask you a couple of questions. First, give us some examples, if you might, of the role that big money plays in influencing politics and influencing legislation. Do you have any examples that you might be able to provide?
Sure. A little while ago, the legislature allocated money for the Pentagon to build new bombers. This was in spite of the Pentagon saying that we don't want any new bombers, we don't want the money. The reason the money was allocated was because of the influences of the corporations that make and help produce those bombers. They have such power with their monetary funds that they can almost shape the way legislation works.
You're absolutely right. That is a very good example. Let me ask you the second question. Recently, the Speaker of the House went on a tour around the country, and he spoke at $10,000 a plate fundraising dinners. $10,000 a plate to go to dinner with Speaker Gingrich. Why would somebody pay $10,000? It's a very good dinner, no doubt. But other than the good quality food, do you think there was another reason why somebody would go to dinner with the Speaker for $10,000 a plate?
Sure, it was influence. By paying $10,000 to a candidate, you get influence over that candidate. They will better represent what you want. An example, if I was a politician and I came back to the office one day and there were 14 messages from me, 13 were from people I'd never heard of, and the last was from someone who had paid me $10,000 at a local charity the week before, the first person I'm going to call back is that big payer. So by paying lots of money, we get more influence.
Okay. David, thank you very much. CVU 3 is on. So is that U32 coming? Or CVU 3? No, come on up. You're right. Okay.
My name's Danielle Ducharme.
I'm Heather Skidmore.
Jessica Williams. We chose drug education for preschool or middle school through some high school students just because we feel that drugs are everywhere and in every high school and involve many people.
I'm just going to give you a couple of statistics. In 1992, drug education budget was cut, and since then, the percentage of 8th graders using marijuana rose from 6.2% in 91 to 13% in 94. That is a 110% increase. From 1992 to 94, pot use rose 66% among the 10th graders and 40% among 12th graders. In 91 through 94, 8th graders who say use pot in the previous years doubled to 13%. In 92 to 94, pot use among the 10th graders increased 66%, while the 12th graders increased 40%. In 94, 95% of 10th graders and 31% of 12th graders said they used marijuana in the past year. Pot use has had the most dramatic turnaround in the 1990s.
Other drugs on the rise gradually: LSD, hallucinogens, stimulants, barbiturates, and cocaine and crack in 1994. At every grade level from 8 to 12, 1 in 5 or 6 tried sniffing an inhalant, such as glue, aerosols, paint thinners, to produce instant highs. And eighth graders are most likely to have used inhalants than any other drug except alcohol or tobacco. And more than a third of the 8th graders surveyed last year, and nearly half of the 12th graders said they used illicit drugs at least once. 20% of the 8th graders said they had used inhalants, the most widely used drug in the age group.
I'm going to go into a little bit about some of the drug education programs that are out there. I'm sure everybody's heard of DARE, which is Drug Abuse Resistance Education. It's not proven to be effective as far as 7th and 8th graders go. They're more concerned about being distant from adults and more concerned about being accepted among their peers. A police officer comes in, this is great for 5th graders. They love the cops and the whole idea of them coming in. But as far as the police officer question and answer, it's not very effective. Kids, as far as 7th and 8th graders, ask questions that they shouldn't be asking. They should be asking questions on, what are the effects of this drug? What would it do in a long term of use? It's proven that 5th graders that have been introduced to the DARE program increased tobacco use from 7th to 9th grade from 13% to 37%. And I see that as being a high jump considering it's supposed to be preventing drug abuse. There's another program called the All-Stars program, which is involving 7th graders in Lexington, North Carolina. It doesn't have teachers teaching the children, has the children acting out skits, doing plays, teaching themselves without realizing that they're actually teaching each other to not do drugs. I believe that's a pretty effective way of doing it. There's also a life skills training that involved 3,597 predominantly white middle-class students in 56 public schools in New York, which were users of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. The whole full program consists of 15 classes in 7th grade, 10 booster sessions in 8th grade, and then it continues on to your freshman year in high school where you're actually involved with older peers as far as 12th graders that are more experienced into the drugs. And among these students that got the complete program versus a control, 44% fewer were pot smokers weekly, 23 to 33% fewer students got drunk once a month, and about 33% fewer were a pack-a-day smoker. So the program seems to be pretty effective as far as teaching the education on the effects of the drugs and what it does to you other than, question and answer. pretty much it.
Thank you very much. Let me ask you a couple of questions. From your own personal observation, how serious is the drug and tobacco problem for young people in the state of Vermont?
Very serious. I mean, it's everywhere. To me, I feel that there's no way you can escape it. You walk into a bathroom at school and there's nothing but filled with smoke. I mean, there are other bathrooms to use, but if that happens to be the closest one, there's no way of avoiding it. You know, you tell them to stop, you bring them to the office, it doesn't stop. They're going to do what they want just because they're rebelling against the administration or whatever it is. And I just feel a lot of it needs to be dealt with as far as education.
What you suggested, some of the government programs, at least in your judgment, are not effective, are not working. What would you suggest for the state of Vermont and nationally in order to get kids away from drugs and tobacco?
I would suggest to start educating, you know, in 5th grade, but then continue through 7th and 8th grade, but not doing it as there where an officer comes in. You have them acting out skits, being one student being the supposed drug dealer and the other being peer pressured into doing it, and having another student in there saying, well, you know, don't do it. So pretty much teaching each other to not do drugs.
So you think that young people can have more of an impact on other young people than adults can, is what you're
Yeah.
saying? Okay, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. People's 5 is up. Names for the record, please.
My name is Asia Lees.
My name's Eli Stokes.
My name is Kaja Page. Our topic is changing the education system. We don't have any great solutions or anything, but we just want to increase the awareness of the fact that there's too much emphasis put on getting good grades and like having a good score, and the desire to learn is gone. Or if it's not gone, it's not there very much or whatever. But the result of this is students just go through school like playing the motions, you know, getting good grades, cramming for tests, memorizing, and they're not necessarily learning anything. Or discovering how they are a self-learner, like what is the best way for them to learn, which they can carry on through life. Another thing that we think is that some of the teachers are kind of like bored with, like they've been teaching the same thing again and again and again and again. It's not that they need to teach something different, but sort of put something else into it, because they're bored of teaching us, and so there's no like, why do we want to sit here and listen? You're bored, we're bored. That's kind of monotonous. It makes learning more of a chore rather than a gift.
And along those same lines, we think that perhaps there could be more courses. There's a lot of courses out there that are trying to help teachers to learn how to become better educators, but many times the teachers themselves don't have the desire to become a better educator. If those teachers could instead of going to classes and things like that and learning how, we could find the teachers that are considered good teachers that actually want to help someone. I dare say that the majority of people that become teachers don't necessarily become a teacher and say, well, I want to go out there and help better the education of our youth and help us become better people. They say, this will be a good paycheck for me. And that's another thing that is a real problem with the way the system is set up right now, that money and getting a good paycheck is how things are judged by. And if you wanted to become a doctor or whatever, it's not because you want to help to cure disease, it's because you want to drive a BMW. And if these things are taught in the school, and that's obviously how it's going to be presented, but if we could get it to if we could help people to understand what they would enjoy doing and put less emphasis on money, perhaps trying to help people understand that, well, hey, money's not the only thing out there. You know, if I've got to go to a job 40 hours a week, make $50,000 a year, and I hate my job, that's not something that's going to make your life happy. So if we could change things and help people to understand that you have to want to learn, that they want to go out and understand what you need to know about yourself. And this is going to help in the school system also, because if someone's enjoying what they're learning, they're going to go out and actually do it themselves. They're going to be interested. I dare say that some people, or if not most people, are here today because they have to be here for a class, not because they're interested in the political system, but because it's for a grade. And if that's going to be the way things are, then nobody's actually going to be happy in their life, and that's a bigger issue than simply educating.
We also feel that there should be, like, you shouldn't have as many required courses. Like, you have a 4-year English requirement to graduate, and I've got on to my 4th year of English, and I sat through the English class, and I just couldn't wait to get out of it. I had no interest in learning it at all, and I didn't really learn much of anything. I just got by. And I think that there should be more elective classes that you can take that you're interested in, so that you have more interest to learn. I think that'd be better for the students.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say along the same lines also that is a major problem, that how general the courses are, because if there's not the opportunity, the general courses are made to expose us to a lot of things so that we can try and find out what we enjoy, but instead it actually decreases that, because the system that's presented in oftentimes is looked at as something that's not enjoyable. So maybe Kenny would like to enjoy English, maybe he does enjoy reading, but perhaps the way it's presented isn't for him. And so in that sense, he's going to go the rest of his life saying, well, I was no good at English. Maybe I can't be a writer, you know, but that's not necessarily the case. The system that is presented, that the English is being presented in, may be the problem. So I think we should need to look at that more than looking at, well, he's just a bad student.
You've raised so many questions, it's hard to know what to ask you. Let me start off by asking you this. Is it your judgment that education in the United States is regarded as something important, something to be cherished? Is education cherished in America?
As a principle, yes. The Institute of Education is looked at as, well, everybody needs an education.
But that's not what I really meant. What I meant is that we know that you need a good education to make money, for example. You made that point. But I mean learning for the sake of learning. Learning is something important unto itself. Is that something you think we place high premium on?
Not really. I don't think the emphasis is placed there at all.
Okay. You've raised very important issues. What I'm hearing from you is you're saying that many students who are in our high schools are bored. They're not stimulated. And they give up. If you get bored, you kind of don't get excited about what's going on. You don't want to learn. Give me some very specific suggestions as to how we can improve that situation in the state of Vermont.
I'll say something. I don't know if we really have suggestions to it. I don't know. I think that all these conferences that teachers go to are great to go to, but other adults are giving them, like teaching them, and maybe they don't remember what it's like to sit through 6 hours and have the lecture. Like maybe children or kids or our age need to give conferences to the teachers.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that students, and I honestly don't know to what degree this is already taking place, but are many high school students able to take advantage of some college courses and go and drop into colleges? Is that something that you think might work?
Yeah, I'm taking an art class at Johnson State right now, which is, like, I've already chosen my direction, my general direction, so I can flourish in that because there's room. But for those students who don't know what they want to do, they have no opportunities. It's just math, English, history, science, fed to them every day.
Are you enjoying and able to keep up with the college course?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. CVU 4 is up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Sarah Johnson. Sarah Dennis. And Sarah Cook. And our topic for our presentation is student voice. Through our high school years, we have discovered the power and voice that we as students have in our school. And we realize this power of student voice has given us an incredibly valuable and meaningful learning experience. We really thought we would to share our perspective on student voice and empowerment. The three of us have had excellent opportunity in our schooling to voice our views, but it's important to recognize that educational reform, especially when it concerns giving students a say in their education, can be very slow. And we hope that some of the ideas that we present today can be a springboard for further action on the part of the students in the audience, as well as action from the Congress.
It's our hope that, it's our goal that we see more student voice, both in schools and on a national level. And for that reason, our presentation is both for Congressman Sanders and for the teachers and the students in the audience.
We believe student voice is fundamental in providing the necessary quality of education to our nation's youth. Student voice empowers students, instilling confidence and providing opportunity to participate in the democratic process.
Student voice gives students control over their own education, getting them more interested and excited about it and making it more meaningful.
Student voice improves the tone and level of respect among students, teachers, administration, and other members of the school community, building a stronger community. Incorporating student voice into the educational experience is a tool for developing contributing members of a democratic society.
We attended a national conference last November where we came together with students and teachers from across the country regarding policy changes for student voice. And we came up with a general policy at that conference. And this first handout that we've given Sanders and that we would like, that we've given to Mr. Sanders and that we would like, and that we would, like if anyone wants a copy of it, you can come and see us afterwards. It's kind of our own version of the general policy that we created.
Mm-hmm. It's something that you could bring back to your own schools and share with other people. And the following is the policy. Regarding school governance, schools should incorporate a democratic decision-making process where all students can be represented. All people in the school community should have an equal opportunity to be heard. There should be a commitment to building this process by making it accessible and by providing students and staff with the time necessary to plan and implement the school's plan of action.
For curriculum, students need to have a voice in what and how they learn. Open dialogue should exist between teachers and students about teacher and student evaluations.
And for school tone and culture, a school should have an atmosphere that reflects its values of student empowerment. This includes allowing the students to help shape the atmosphere of the school. The climate of the school should be one of open communication between all its members. Students and faculty should feel equally comfortable in discussing concerns and suggestions. The first step towards creating a school culture that allows for student voice lies within each individual, and this is something that we really want to stress today, that each person must be responsible for speaking out and for listening and encouraging the voices of others. The school atmosphere should reflect the democratic ideals of our society. In an ideal world, as well as a democracy, every person has a voice, and so each person's voice should be listened to and respected.
And the most important thing is how and what can you do, and that's the second handout we have, and that's also available if you want it. And so we're just going to go ahead and read a few of those off.
Okay, here are some suggestions. Create more funding for education. Let's think about the future. If students are empowered today, they will be prepared tomorrow to contribute to society in an active and productive way. But this cannot be accomplished on a shoestring budget. Ask yourself, what is more important than education? What is more important than our future?
Encourage students to teach each other. Everyone is good at something. Find these strengths and build upon them by creating opportunities for students to teach their peers. Through this teaching process, students will gain confidence and leadership skills.
Invite students to serve on national committees and panels concerning education. Create a position for students to advise the Secretary of Education, a student representative in Washington.
And a final suggestion today, create charters for student rights within your local schools and send these charters to other schools and encourage them to create their own charters. Let's begin a grassroots student voice movement.
Excellent presentation. First question is, are you going to distribute these documents to everybody in the room? Do you have enough?
We've got about 15 or 20 copies of each one. Maybe we could give a few to each school
Right.
that's here.
I would strongly encourage all of the schools here to get copies of these very excellent documents. Second question I'd like to ask you. To what degree are these principles in existence now in CVU? Are they in existence?
I think that we're here because we have gotten these principles from our school and from our education. Now, that's not to say that every student in CVU has gotten the same things that we have. I think that our school does an excellent job of providing opportunity for students, but something that it doesn't do quite as well is make sure that that opportunity, make sure that all students realize and recognize that opportunity. So.
And just a little bit to add. And when the group before us just went, we were all sympathizing with them because we had the same kind of problems. And it's just, I think we still have the problems, but there is student voice at our school, and that helps us deal with it.
Let me ask you the last question. In the last election nationally, only 38% of the American people came out to vote. What do you see the relationship between student democracy and democracy within our country as a whole?
It's building on the future. If we start in schools, the problem with our democracy today is that as students grow up in our educational system, they don't learn that much about it. So once they get out there into the real world, they haven't had very much practice with it and don't know exactly what to do. And one of the best ways to remedy that problem is to start dealing with democracy in schools.
Thank you very, very much. Excellent presentation. Brattleboro 6.
Hi, my name is Andrea Jakewith, and my topic is gangs and street violence.
Andrea, hold it close to your mouth so everybody can hear you.
Okay. The phenomenon of gangs and gang violence is widespread throughout this country and is spreading rapidly and fast becoming a societal problem of great magnitude. Some people blame the gang problems on the poverty that this country is struggling with. With the possible exception of some states in the Northeast, every state now has some sort of gang problem. In 1961, there were about 23 cities in the United States with known street gangs. Today, there are at least 187 different cities with known street gangs. In 1992, there were an estimated 4,881 gangs in the United States. LA County in California is the gang capital of the nation. In 1991, there were 150,000 persons in 1,000 gangs in LA County. John Hull of Emerge magazine said, If you could eliminate the narcotics problem tomorrow, you'd still have a significant gang problem. If the next day you eliminated the gang problem, you'd still have a significant crime problem. End quote. Guns, gats, straps, or toolies, whatever you choose to call them, firearms are a major part of gangs and violence in general today with American youths. Gunshot wounds are the leading cause of death for all teenage boys in America. Guns kill 14 kids in America every day. It is estimated that 1 out of 25 African American male children, now in kindergarten, will be murdered with a gun by the age 18. In a recent survey conducted, it was found that 1 in 5 high school students carry a weapon with them. The vast majority of juveniles get guns from their own homes. The majority of accidental shootings occur in homes where kids can easily get guns. In a 1989 poll, nearly 3 out of 5 Americans own a gun. So many youths have firearms because firepower becomes a substitute for the perceived absence of any other kind of power necessary to attain status and wealth. 5,000 kids are killed by a gun every year in the United States. There is a trend that appears to be accelerated by a weak economy and scarcity of legitimate jobs for the young minority men. That is why they tend to join gangs. Basic needs that gangs get by joining gangs, that kids get by joining gangs, are structure, nurturing, economic opportunity, and a sense of belonging. Most kids join gangs because that's what there is to join where they live. There aren't sports teams that they can join, and there aren't jobs that they can get because of the weak economy, so that is why they turn to gangs. There are 2 well-known black gangs in the western United States. They are known as the Crips and the Bloods. The Crips and the Bloods are rivals in the western United States. The Crips wear blue and the Bloods wear red. There is a lot of hatred between these 2 gangs. A Blood will not ask for a cigarette because the word begins with a C, as in Crips. Instead they ask Bigarette. Parents are very fearful for their children's lives when they go out to play or go to school. If they are caught wearing the wrong colors, they could be misinterpreted for belonging to a gang and get hurt or killed. Parents dress their children carefully in brown, yellow, or other neutral colors, and they avoid buying British Knights brand sneaker because the initials have come to mean blood killer, a sign of disrespect in a blood neighborhood. Nearly 50% of the black male population aged 21 through 24 is involved in some sort of gang activity. More than 200,000 people live in South Central LA, and most have turned their homes into what look like jails, heavy metal grid bars across windows and doors. Their yards have turned into military compounds with wrought iron fences. They do this to protect their property, family, and themselves from gangs and gang involvement. Solutions to ending the gang problems of the United States are difficult to come up with. Trying to attract the interests of teenagers is also hard to do. Some suggestions have been recreational activities for the students to participate in after school so they can stay off the streets. A way to bring teenagers into the picture of helping out is by ways of teacher training. They need training to recognize gang members and discourage their activities. Other than recreational activities, there should be also an alternative for those non-athletic students. There should be tighter security officers at schools to deal with troublesome students. Increased discipline would mean stricter enforcement of existing disciplinary rules. Metal detectors are also a way of weeding out the weapons. And in some schools, there's a truancy court that deals with the people with high absenteeism. There's also alternative schools with programs for disciplinary problem children. Former gang members participate in community awareness campaigns. And one last solution would be to control the unemployment by have more jobs available for students and young people. That's it.
Andrea, thank you very much. Excellent. Andrea, let me, if I could just ask you a brief question. Just one question. In your judgment, has the government or other interests done a good job in controlling or eliminating youth gangs in America?
Could you say that again?
Has the government done a good job so far in eliminating gangs or dealing with gangs?
I don't think so, because there's a lot of unemployment out there, and that's why that these teens are turning to gangs, because they don't have anything to do. So I think that the government should create more jobs for the students to get involved with.
Are you familiar with the Summer Youth Employment Program?
A little bit, yeah.
Summer Youth Employment Program is a federal program which allows low and middle income students to have summer jobs. It's a very important program in districts such as you are speaking about in Los Angeles, where unemployment is very high. One of the things that I should tell you a little bit sadly, we've been fighting this fight, but we think that the leadership in Congress is going to eliminate the funding for the Summer Youth Employment Program, which I think addresses some of the concerns that you've raised. Okay, Andrea, thank you very much.
Thank you.
U32 is up. Amnesty International.
My name is Harmony Harriman, and I'm a student area coordinator for Amnesty International, and I'm an intern with the Vermont Refugee Assistance.
My name is Tetra Gayed. I'm also a student area coordinator for Vermont, and I'm also an intern with Vermont Refugee Assistance. The first thing we want to talk about is, actually we're not here to talk about amnesty. That was a little blooper we made. We're here to talk about immigration and refugees in the U.S. The first thing that we really want to talk about is a bill that passed on March 21st in the House, H.R. 2202. That's very upsetting to me because it effectively bans people who have genuine political asylum claims from entering the U.S. or ever staying, because when a person flees their country with fear of safety and they come here, do you think they're going to come in off the plane and say, whoops, we better go get a lawyer and file some papers? You know, no, they're worried about their safety and often spend months trying to save their family and just getting settled, which pretty much bans them from ever filing for asylum.
The bill H.R. 2202 would ensure that any immigrant or refugee who is caught entering or crossing the border illegally will be permanently barred from ever legally entering the country. Yet there are instances where a refugee has no other option. Immigrants lack knowledge about the specific opportunities of becoming a citizen and often do not understand the process itself or how to negotiate the INS bureaucracy.
There is a section in the bill that says that immigrants who are here illegally or undocumented immigrants are unable to receive health care through our public system. And there's a myth that the reason that our healthcare system is in the ground is because it's the immigrants, it's the poor people that are just dragging it down. But really, immigrants use healthcare less than the general public. A 1992 U.S. Department of Justice report found that immigrants use federally funded services less than the general population. And it's just, there have been several studies that show that it's not immigrants that are pulling us down, it's everyone else's stupidity and ignorance about the immigrants. Most hospital care costs for undocumented immigrants were paid by private insurance, which was 47%, or by the immigrants and their families themselves, which is 45%. That only leaves 8% of the immigrants in the country that were paid for by the government.
This bill would also deny undocumented immigrants benefits under any means tested program funded by the federal government or the state government, as well as being ineligible to receive grants, to receive earned income tax credit, to receive SSI benefits, Medicaid, food stamps, housing assistance, unemployment benefits, college financial aid, just among others. Although undocumented immigrants alone pay $7 billion per year in taxes, in 1990, undocumented immigrants paid $2.7 billion in Social Security and $168 million in unemployment insurances. And this is according to a publication by the Urban Institute.
I'm just gonna do a quick story about a man that I know. He's 18 years old and is from Sudan, and right now is lost in the warp zone of the American immigration system. He's actually living in Woodbury. He apparently is some kind of dangerous criminal because he came here with a false passport. So now he's in jail, and the first time I met him, I asked him, well, how long will you be here? Meaning, how long would he be staying with the family that he was staying with? And he misinterpreted it to mean, how long will you be in the U.S.? And he just said immigration and shrugged his shoulders. And that was just I think probably the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life is this man just lost.
Due to time restrictions, we are unable to address all the myths and understatements, or overstatements, excuse me, but I can say that to blame immigrants is to scapegoat an easy, unpopular target and to divert responsibility from more proper parties.
Thank you very much. This is a subject which is getting a whole lot of discussion, as you know, in the Congress and all around the country. Let me ask you a couple of questions. What does political asylum mean, and why is that important?
Well, to me, it means someone who, because of their beliefs, because of their actions, needs to flee their home, needs to leave, whether it's because they were against their government in their country, whether it's because, like the girl was saying, wore the wrong color in the wrong country, come to a place where they can be safe, where they can wake up in the morning and know that, okay, nobody's going to shoot me today. That's asylum to me.
Did you want to comment on it? Okay. Are you immigrants? Your family immigrants?
Yes, my family was immigrants. There's a history of immigrants in my family.
Being that we are immigrants, I think, to this country.
I think essentially what you're saying is that everybody other than the Native Americans are immigrants, that we are.
Yes, true. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Williamstown is up. Your names for the record, please.
My name is Amber Johnson, and Amy Carmine and Athena Wright, and our topic is continuation of the Summer Youth Employment Program. The Summer Youth Employment Program has kept us off the streets, kept us from use of drugs, alcohol, and violence of any type. The youth program has also given us the experience of how living can be in real life ahead of us, and how to conserve money for our future.
There could be nothing more positive in our lives than the Summer Youth Employment Program. It is a continuance of encouragement of being a responsible young adult. The Summer Youth Employment Program has been a plus in so many young teens' lives. And in some cases, it may help to slow down the cycle of the welfare generation. It gives us ideas, training for possible future employment, and it gives us a better idea of what we need to do to accomplish our future.
Please help us to keep what has been proven to be a wonderful chance to understand what is expected from us as adults.
It has given us a great source of self-pride in our abilities to contribute and know what this is, that this is a great start in life. And with your support in us, you have to also given us hope that you believed in all of us. We need this opportunity to prove that we are serious about our future and need your reconsideration to allow this program to continue.
That's it.
Thank you very much. It's interesting, just a moment ago, when the young lady from Broward was talking about gangs and violence, and I hadn't realized that you were coming on so soon. I mentioned the Youth Summer Employment Program. For all of it, it's a wonderful program for all of the reasons that you have indicated. Were all of you guys involved in the Summer Youth Program? Can you tell us maybe what kind of work you did?
What did you do? I've been in the youth program for 2 years now, and the first year I worked at Project Independence, which is helping elderly people take care of themselves and entertain them. And last summer, I cleaned the elementary school of Williamstown to get ready for school.
I've only been in this for 1 year, which was last year, but I worked with Amber at the elementary school cleaning, and I thought it was a really great thing because a lot of people that are inexperienced, like under 16, don't want to hire you because
So you got some work experience as well as make some money.
Yeah.
Okay. Amy, what did you do?
I worked at the hospital as a stock clerk in basement, and I was in the program for 1 year. It was a very good skill because I'm going to be working at the hospital after I graduate.
So I think what you're seeing here is an example of a federal program which meant a lot to you three and to tens and tens of thousands of other young Americans. There is a major debate taking place in Congress right now as to whether this fund, with this program, should continue to be funded. And I believe very strongly that it should. But we're fighting against people who prefer to put money into airplanes and bombers that the Pentagon doesn't need rather than in programs like this. So I thank you very much for crystallizing one of the major debates taking place in Congress. Thank you. U32-2.
For the record, my name is Jackie Frazier. This is Kate Gerson, Kay McClellan, and Drew McNaughton. Our discussion is actually overcrowding our budget and education. We've been asked to directly discuss problems that arise within our school and our students participating in school for 7 years, being in a high school. And the problem that most prominently arose for us was the overcrowding problem in our school. As you may not know, we have 5 districts that come to one school, and that's not including people that are paying a tuition to come here. As most schools are having a problem with budget now, unless they live, earlier someone was discussing how in certain towns, such as a resort town, you may have more money to put into a school system. We have 5 towns, which is, the school was actually built at one time to support around 750 students. At this point in time, we have close to 910 people, which is not that much over, but each year we are increasing. 2 years ago, we had a class of about 80 people, 80 students. My class has about 130, and the upcoming class of 7th grade next year will have around 170. As you can see, that's a substantial increase each year. If you were to look at a town annual report, you'll see that each year we are increasing drastically in number of students, but we don't have the budget to increase either space or more teachers. Sometimes we actually hold classes in this auditorium over the side here and in a small media room upstairs, which is normally held for just movies. Each year, as the budget stays the same and the capacity stays the same, students go up. And what we would like to discuss, and we have a movie to show you, is that each year when the amount of students do go up, the actual grade of the school goes down, the standard, the way we survive, the air we breathe, and the rooms that we populate, which is sometimes a student ratio of 30 students to 1 teacher, when ideally it's around 20 to 1. So each time that we do this, we want to show you how it looks in reality. So, move down.
You want to take the mic with you down there?
There's a mic down there.
Okay, they're going to show us something on the monitor, a TV monitor.
I'll stay.
Yeah.
What did you want me to say?
Can everyone hear me? Due to a reduced janitorial staff within the past few years and an increased student population, we've seen an overall depreciation of the physical conditions of the school. Very little classroom space is available. This American history class uses a corner of the auditorium as a makeshift classroom for one period of the day. This is one of our stairwells. Now this is entering one of the junior high classrooms in a separate section of the school. As you can see, there are many classrooms at U32 which have a severe overcrowding problem. This is a high school classroom with a ratio of about 30 to 1.
Alright, so that was like another video to just show visually what's the matter with it. Now, what I want to talk about what some of the funds are directed towards instead of building maintenance. And by 1997, the U32 budget is planning on increasing itself by $617,000 and $409,940 of which is going to special ed programs. I think special ed's increasing itself by 85.7%, and while all this is going on, the maintenance of U32 is going rapidly down. We already mentioned the American history class that's held right over there, but there's also a Spanish class upstairs that has 30 students in it, and the room's about as big as like a third of this stage. We're all crammed together in it. It decreases individualized help, and one person can't get individual help one-on-one with the teacher, so they fall behind and they can't catch up. The ventilation problem in the school you've probably already noticed, and so when one student gets sick, the whole student body gets sick. So I think on a national scale, this is U32 is a representation of the problem, and that we're supposed to be like a world power, and I don't think our schools should be run this way because it's a bad way to represent our country.
Thank you very much. I think you showed us through the television the real manifestation of priorities in this country in a certain sense. How would you change the priorities in this country so that schools like U32 would not have these problems? Hold the mic.
I think how we change the priorities of the country. I think what the officials are doing is just throwing money at the special education problem and hoping it'll go away. And I think if they actually train the teachers to deal with that, a lot of the money, that's just an example of where the money goes. I mean, it's not the only place. A lot of the money goes to different things that don't really benefit the mass of students. And I mean, the building like itself, I don't think there's much you can do about it except for taking away from other programs that aren't necessities, or not necessities, but that don't even help the students.
Okay, how could we raise, what I meant by that question is on a national level, if we felt that good schools was a high priority, from what other ways do we have to raise the money to make sure that education is given more respect and more support?
It's not just raising a certain amount of money to give school respect. School has national respect because it's known and very well known that you need a school as well as secondary education to make money and as you go on throughout life. And what we were trying to display here is if we wanted to prioritize where our money and spending was going, would be to prioritize schools in general, that not only is special education being, as an example, getting more funding than others. It's to choose, and I understand that taxpayers cannot afford to give more money to schools, but it's to realize that when you make a base plan to build a school that has 5 districts with thousands of acres, that each year grows in population by hundreds, of thousands of people, that you need to realize that the school is not going to hold the capacity of those students in growing years. I mean, in 10 years, the amount of students is increasing 200 people. If you can think about what's going to happen by the year 2005, it's going to increase even more. Just what I'm saying and what I think we want to point out is that when you start to build a school, you need to leave room to build change.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. We've come to the end of the presentations. Let me just say for a start, tell you, I have been enormously impressed by the high quality of the testimony. Without exception, without any exception, every piece of testimony was, in my view, well thought out and very well presented. So my congratulations to all of you who have worked on the projects. What I'd like to do now, we have a little bit of time left, is to give, there should be a microphone someplace, is there? Over there, okay. If anybody would like to make any brief comment, ask any question, the microphone is open. If anyone want to come up and, on any subject that's on your mind.
We didn't get a chance to ask you what you voted for HR 2202.
I voted against it.
You voted against it?
I just wanted to make the comment that in November I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. with the National Youth Leadership Conference, and we were addressed as a group of about 300 students from all across the nation by somebody that represented the Defense Department. And I asked him how he felt that our legislators and our government could back defense bills that put billions of dollars into security in our nuclear weapons, having everybody in the nation feel safe about our nuclear weapons, where people couldn't read. And his excuse was that ideally education would be nice, but that didn't solve the problems, and that people needed to feel that we could use our weapons if the necessity arose. But I'd just like to say that for everybody's comments about education and the system, that I think it's pretty obvious how people feel, and that should be represented in legislation, in the Congress and by the president, and that's not me representing.
Your point is an excellent point, but I think you're factually correct. I think polls show that people would support a lot more funding for education and a lot less funding for the military. Yes? Okay. When you get to the microphone, please state your names as well.
My name is Dustin Sabalas. I wanted to bring up the concern. I want to ask the people who are gathered today, when we were talking before about students not getting this and not getting enough freedom to do this, is it ever to the fact that it's maybe not that we're not getting enough from other people, that we're getting this big feeling from everybody else who's not us that we want all this, we have to have all this, and we're greedy and we can't do an honest day's work. I feel like we're always getting we're the generation that doesn't do anything. And I feel offended when it comes to, and people are saying that we're not getting taught enough. There's a lot of people that are wanting to be coddled along, but it's not everyone. And it's not everyone in the who have to break away from everything that was made. And I was just wondering if I'm totally alone on this. Is anybody else offended by the fact that we got this stigmatism as a generation, that we're left here and we're getting coddled and we always have to have all this freedom and all this. I mean, we're responsible in general. Am I wrong?
Okay, other thoughts and comments? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Megan. I just wanted to say that, well, I agree with the fact that we need, I agree that grades are kind of important, but I also agree with that other testimony before, I don't know what it was, but about we should have our own choice about what we get, more electives and stuff. And I'd also like to ask, what is your view on that, the thing about where the elections where you run and you vote in the campaign funding? What is your view on that?
I very much agree with the presentation that was made here. I think we should have it. The current system is very corrupt because it enables people with a lot of money to buy politicians and buy elections. And I think we should move to a system that's largely public funded. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Phil Waltman, and I've been hearing a lot about expanding the governor's terms, and I think that's a big step away from democracy, because the more that you get to vote, the more choice you have in your government. How do you feel about that?
I think you're referring to extending the governor's term, the lieutenant governor's term from 2 years to 4 years. I agree with you. I am in favor of the 2-year term of the governor for precisely the reason that you gave. As a member of Congress, do you know how long my term is? How long is my term? You know? That's right. All members of Congress have a 2-year term. And while it's sometimes a drag to have to run elections every 2 years, it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. Ultimately, while that is a problem, I think it is better to give the people a chance to vote for you or against you every 2 years than every 4 years or every 6 years. So I would agree with you. I would like to see the governor's term kept to 2 years.
Hi, I have a question for you.
Yep.
I'm Alyssa. We came here today to express our concerns and what we would like to see change in our society. And I was just wondering, what could we expect from you to do about this? About our concerns that we expressed to you?
What you can expect me to do is to read the transcripts, and I think I've heard you very, very clearly. What each of you who have made presentations will get back from us is the status on issues, is the status of the issues currently in Congress that you are concerned with. And I will tell you what my views and what I'm trying to do and how we're incorporating your ideas in those debates. Okay? So we're going to get back to you. Let me throw it back to you. When you tell us your concerns, we're going to tell you what's going on in Congress right now, send you back that information so you can evaluate what is good or what is bad in terms of what's going on and how it should be improved. But I will take very seriously all of the ideas that have been presented to me today. Okay?
Hi, I'm Sarah Dennis. I just want to say I'm very appreciative of this congressional town meeting. And I find it kind of ironic that it's kind of the first thing or something that's kind of different, because it's really important for us to be talking to you and for you to be listening, and I am again very appreciative of that. But I was wondering what power either you have as a congressman, or what power either locally or federally we have to expect us from each congressman, that they go back to students and that they're asking kids, not just in Vermont, but kids in their respective states, what's important to them.
Well, as a matter of fact, that's an excellent question. And when I get back to Washington, what I'm going to do is ask my colleagues how many of them are doing similar type of programs, and see if we can develop a mechanism through the Congress to bring this to 50 states in the country. Okay, because I think it's a good idea.
Hi, I'm Sarah Johnson. My question was very similar to Sarah's. I think you did a wonderful job, and I think you should be commended with the meeting today. And it's the irony of it struck me, because I do feel your support for all of the issues that we brought up today, and I feel a little frustrated, to be truthful, that I feel like you, who are supportive of us, are here listening, but that, you know, we all did do some hard work, and I'd like to see it go further than this room. And I'm sure you hear me, but
yeah, and I will do my best to take your ideas and transplant them into reality and into legislation. But I want to throw it back to you and to say that I'm one person, right? And if there's any lesson that should be learned today, is that you have power. And I would like you to be thinking about how you can help change the state, change the nation through your political involvement as well, okay? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for your work.
Okay.
I just want to say something on behalf of the teachers, because they did bring us here, and it shows that there still are some that are willing to take the initiative and apply the concepts to students. So.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Noah Perez. I'm basically up here just to back what Dustin Sabalas said. We're really being coddled pathetically in this school system. We do nothing for our education except for stand there and watch everybody do our work for us. And I just think that's wrong. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Eric Commons, and I'm a resident of all of Vermont. I'm mostly concerned about the violence that's been going on mostly in Burlington and on Church Street, the rapes that have been going on, and incest amongst them of a lot of people, and how this is going to be dealt with. Having the budget not have been passed, and Police Chief Scully wanting to have more police officers on 24 hours a day at the tops and bottoms of all streets intersecting, crossing with Church Street. How's this going to be done, and how is the rest of Burlington going to be safe when the cops are distributed just to Church Street? Are they going to get special training? Because there are a lot more people in danger of being hurt, and Burlington is the most notable area of Vermont, and that's where most of our money for tourism comes in from, and a lot of Canadian tourists come down, and are they going to be afraid of getting beaten down or raped when they come to Burlington or the rest of Vermont? That's what they see, and this is therefore going to affect the rest of the economy. So, I mean, I'm worried about that, not something typical of someone my age, but I'm not typical.
Okay. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, I probably could have given you a more detailed answer, but I can say this. For a start, you've raised a very important issue. But it's not only a problem for Burlington, it's a problem within the state, it's a problem within the country. And I'll tell you, as men, I think the men right now have got to stand up and be very firm in saying not only is rape inexcusable, completely, in any way, shape, or form, but domestic violence, slapping around your girlfriend, that is not macho behavior, that's cowardly behavior, and as men we must make sure that that doesn't happen anymore, okay? Okay, let
Feminine tool. Thank you.
There was a comment made in one of the presentations that some of the kids here, that most of the kids here were forced to be here because of class. And I'd just like to point out that that's not the way it was for me. And I know many people in this audience that that's not the way it was for them. We're here because we want to share our views and we want to hear what other people have to say.
Thank you.
I'm Jen Arner, and as a senior who recently turned 18, I'm really looking forward to voting this year. And I've heard a couple people say things today and other days about the fact that, we're 18 and we can really go out and vote, but, why bother? And I just want to say that there is a reason to bother and we can have an impact.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last comment right here.
My name is Beth Carpenter, and I just wanted to agree with what was just said before about us not being here because we were forced to be. And also, there was a comment made earlier about the fact that that teachers are only teaching for the money, and I have a fact sheet with me today that says the teachers are one of the lowest paid professionals in the United States in 1994, I believe it's from. And maybe I've been really lucky at my school, but I've had some incredible teachers who love what they're doing, and I think that the majority of them do it simply because they love teaching and not for the money, because there's no money involved in teaching.
Okay. Okay, thank you all very much. I think it was a great hearing. Thank you all for your help. Bye-bye.